Good morning. I'd like to make a statement before we start. The standing orders of this Parliament explicitly state that members shall respect the authority of the presiding officer. It is inevitable that decisions of the Chair will not meet the approval of all members at all times. That has always been the case. Nevertheless, it is imperative that the authority of the Chair is respected at all times. If that were not the case, the Parliament would be unable to carry out the functions that the people of Scotland have asked us to undertake. Yesterday, Michael McMahon showed gross discourtesy and disrespect to the Chair. However, as I did not clearly hear what the member said at the time, I decided to speak to him privately and to take time to study the official report of proceedings once it was available. I acknowledge that Mr McMahon apologised. Had Mr McMahon not done so, I would have referred the matter to the Parliamentary Bureau. So serious did I consider the discourtesy to the Chair. Taking all the circumstances into account, I have decided to exclude Mr McMahon from the Chamber for the duration of today's Chamber business. This is not a decision that I have taken lightly. Members will recall that on the 30th of October, I referred to Donald Dewar's words on the opening of the Scottish Parliament when he explained to us, "This is about more than our politics and our laws. This is about who we are and how we carry ourselves." I told members then that I expected them to consider very carefully their choice of words and the tone in which they are delivered. It is a matter of regret that a few short weeks later, we have witnessed the type of behaviour that Mr McMahon displayed yesterday. We have important business in front of us. As parliamentarians, those who elect us to this place look to us to show leadership and to debate the issues before us with respect and dignity for the institution of this Parliament. As presiding officer, I will support, to the limits of my power, the conduct of parliamentary business in this chamber. I will, however, not tolerate behaviour that falls short of the standards that the people we are privileged to represent expect of us. Thank you. We now move to First Minister's questions. Question number 1, Joanne Lamont.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the First Minister what engagements he has planned for the rest of the day. First Minister.
Presiding Officer, I thought the Chamber, given it's going to occupy ministers a good deal today, would like a quick update on the severe weather situation facing many of our fellow citizens. As at 10:30, there were 12 flood alerts in Scotland and a flood warning for Glenlyon in Perthshire. The catchment area of Ruckle Water has experienced heavy rain this morning, and that may lead to the river becoming bank full in Comrie. Additional flood sensors have been installed around the village, and it is hoped and believed that they will hold. Other areas which could be affected by flooding include the White Sands in Dumfries and Dalmellington in Ayrshire. The Resilience Unit has been activated for most of this week, and ministers, Scottish ministers, are attending to their job and function with their partners in protecting the people of Scotland from these severe weather conditions.
Joanne Lamont.
We certainly hope that ministers were doing their job. In February 2011, more than 18 months ago, the Finance Secretary John Swinney made an announcement on college funding that still left a cut this year. On Tuesday, Mr Swinney said he was always on top of the figures, as is his duty. He confirmed that he knew at the time that the First Minister was giving the wrong figures on colleges, despite nodding away along with the rest of the front bench. When, in the last 18 months, did John Swinney inform the First Minister that college funding was to be cut this year, and how often did he update him?
First Minister.
Yes, ministers will attend to their job in doing their best to protect people of Scotland from these extreme and severe weather conditions. The mistake for which I apologised last week was my mistake in terms of a briefing which I read out from, which suggested that college funding was increasing compared to last year on this, and a table which had forgotten to include the 11 million additional funding which had been devoted to the colleges last year. That was why the mistake was made. I came to the Chamber and apologised in full. Mr Russell has also come to the Chamber and apologised in full. in any other parliamentary chamber I can possibly think of, ministers or anyone else coming to a chamber and giving an apology and explanation is accepted with good grace and as the right thing to do. In this chamber, that should be the same thing to do. I have looked carefully at the mechanism which was introduced in this Parliament for all members, not just ministers, all members correcting inadvertent errors. I note that it has been used 6 times by ministers and 1 SNP member. It hasn't been used by any other member in this chamber. Is that, I wonder, because they have never made mistakes? Or is it perhaps because they have chosen not to correct the mistakes that they've made?
Joanne Lamont.
Well, whatever that was, it wasn't a gracious recognition of the mistake that he had made. Last week I was accused of being a puppet, and it turned out there was only one puppet in here, and it was Pinocchio. Because the fact of the matter is that last week we were able to hand the First Minister the document written by his own Cabinet Secretary that proved that we were right, and despite that he chose not to be honest with us. But he didn't answer the question I asked him. Are we honestly to believe that this was not discussed at Cabinet? It cannot surely be right that levels of investment in Scotland's colleges were not discussed at Cabinet, or at least between the Finance Secretary, the First Minister and Mike Russell. Did these discussions take place? And if so, can the First Minister spell out when they took place, and if they didn't, why not? And does that explain why he got the math wrong last Thursday?
First Minister.
I read out the wrong figure from a briefing paper. That is the explanation. I mean, let's just examine Joanne Lamont's fantastic conspiracy theory about this. Why would I write out the wrong number from a briefing paper if I was aware of the various documents that had been presented? Why would the Education Secretary present the comprehensive information to the Education Committee if the explanation is not that I simply read out the wrong figure in a briefing paper? Can I point out the wrong figure is because we increased college funding last year, and that wasn't counted in the figure in the table that I read out. And the table, incidentally, was tabled in Spice last week. I do hope that Joanne Lamont has bothered to read it. So the explanation to all of Joanne Lamont's wondering in this matter is I made a mistake by reading out the wrong figure. Can we now move on to the substantive issue about college funding in Scotland and the efforts of this government to protect and defend the education system in Scotland from cutbacks from Westminster and a surrender in terms of policy from the Labour government?
Joanne Lamont. Order. Order.
It didn't take long to get to the alibi when you're under pressure, First Minister. Please take responsibility for something, because the question I would ask is, when the First Minister accidentally read out the wrong figure from a briefing paper, why did his Finance Secretary and his Education Secretary, who knew that wasn't true, start nodding in agreement with him? And it's because it goes to the heart of this government. It goes to the heart of the Scottish Government's pretence of competence. Keep people in the dark, assert the opposite of the truth, and hope that no one will notice. Because the worrying thing about all of this isn't that the First Minister allegedly got one specific figure wrong. If we are to believe him, it is that he didn't know whether spending in Scotland's colleges was going up or down. Which is worse? The First Minister is so incompetent he doesn't know when spending is going up or down, or that he deliberately misled the people of Scotland and denied the impact of his choices on the workforce in the colleges and communities right across Scotland.
First Minister.
People are to be held responsible for their body language in which people are making statements, and I think the Labour Party are on very difficult ground indeed in terms of the looks, the glowers and the body languages which infect these benches. Can I introduce Joanne Lamont to some of the substantial points?
Order.
She says it's evading responsibility in order to point out that in Westminster there are severe cuts affecting the people of Scotland. But it's not evading responsibility to point out that under the system of finance and government that the Labour Party have supported in Scotland, that our budget is directly relationship to the budget at Westminster through the Barnett formula. And therefore, of course, it is information that's relevant to look at what's happening to budget funding in England and Wales. And Joanne Lamont knows that it's going down by 1.7% this year compared to last in terms of the budget for Scotland's colleges. I wish it was otherwise, but that is the reality. South of the border, the figure is 5%. And given that our budget is directly related to the budget in education south of the border, then that surely is relevant information. The second argument I put consistently to Joanne Lamont is to support the regionalisation programme. The Scottish Government are investing through the non-profit distribution mechanism massive sums in the colleges of Scotland. Colleges like Forth Valley College, where campus have been reinvigorated, Kilmarnock and Inverness, and the huge expenditure in the Glasgow colleges. That is the strategy, through the regionalisation concept and that investment, to bring about and protect the college infrastructure of Scotland so that it can serve its duty towards the students of Scotland. Now, that's not evading responsibility. That's living up to the responsibility of doing the best that this government possibly can for the students and college students of Scotland in the face of attacks from Westminster, which Joanne Lamont and her party have supported the system which brings about that cut in funding.
Joanne Lamont. Order. Joanne Lamont.
What on earth was all that about? Because this is about his choices in education and his inability to be honest about what he's choosing to support and what he's choosing not to support. This is a man who can give the most exact answer ever given to a parliament, any time, anywhere, at 12 o'clock, and by 5 has to admit his statements were the opposite of the truth, because we provided the information, not because he offered it. Whether we're talking about Europe, DAVIDSON investing in Scotland, or the number of jobs in the renewable sector, the First Minister just makes it up. Does he honestly expect us to believe that he, his Finance Minister and Mike Russell didn't agree college cuts in the months before they came to this chamber to deny them? Now, I ask the First Minister again, what is worse, that he doesn't know what his government is doing to the colleges of this country, or that he is prepared knowingly to mislead the people of Scotland?
First Minister.
Well, I note that Joanne Lamont has
First Minister.
never taken the facility of making a correction in this chamber. I have a full list of the number of times that her statements in this chamber have been at variance with the facts. For example, on what she claimed on the 9th of February was the 800 million steel contract for the Forth crossing, when actually the steel contract is around 10% of the total contract. When she claimed there were falling numbers of people in the National Health Service, which is also not true since this government took office. These questions and this apparent position of Joanne Lamont that she never makes mistakes is at severe variance with the facts that we can produce for the chamber. The difference is this, that when a mistake was made, both myself and the Minister of Education apologised to this chamber and corrected the mistake. The Labour Party never corrects their mistakes. They don't correct the mistakes they make on a regular basis in this chamber, nor do they correct or apologise for the great mistakes, like the war in Iraq pushed upon us by a Labour government, like the PFI programme, which is going to foist upon the finances of Scotland for years and generations to come. And no apology from Joanne Lamont about tearing up, not just attempting to tear up the SNP manifesto, but tearing up the Labour manifesto on tuition fees, on prescription charges, on transport for older people, from free care for the elderly, each one of which identified in Labour's manifesto last year, each one of which has been consigned to the dustbin of history by our Cuts Commission. That's why this government is trusted, and that's why the Labour Party is not.
this goes to the heart of the problem with the Scottish Government. The idea that that is an answer to the question I asked is complete nonsense. I asked him what's worse, to be so incompetent that you don't know that your choices in spending are leading to cuts in colleges, or that you think you can get away with misleading people. The fact of the matter is, I have said we need to be honest, not just about what we choose to spend money on, but what are the consequences. And what you have done round this is to deny those consequences. And I ask you to reflect again on the choices you're making to cut colleges at the very time when our young people need them most.
First Minister.
The question is a mistake was made and apologised for. The point on the question of honesty is, as Deputy Leader of the Labour Party, Joanne Lamont promised to freeze the council tax on page 69, retain the commitment to free personal care, retain the abolition of tuition fees for Scotland students on page 32, retain the concessionary travel scheme on page 64, no charges for prescriptions on page 42, and protect frontline police numbers on page 48. Every single one of these solemn Labour commitments is in the process of being sacrificed and jeopardised. That is nothing like honesty, but more importantly, it's why the Labour Party will be a guy long time before they get anywhere near government in Scotland, as these facts become known to the people of our country.
Question number 2, Ruth Davidson.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the First Minister when he will next meet the Prime Minister.
Minister.
No plans near future.
Ruth Davidson.
I think we've all just seen in his answers to the Labour Party leader, the First Minister diminish his office today. But in one of his answers, he said that we must move on to the substantive issue of college funding and recognise his government's efforts to, I believe he said, protect and defend the college budget. So let's look at that. Last week, the First Minister repeatedly told us that the further education budget for 2012-13 was £546 million. Yet the draft budget for 2013-14, the government says that the revenue budget for further education will be reduced to £511 million. Can he confirm that this represents a £34 million single-year cash cut? And I can tell him now that's more than 5%.
First Minister.
It's actually £512 billion on the figures that have been presented, according to the table I've had here,
Order.
Which I always present with great care to this chamber. Can Ruth Davidson perhaps understand this? If you look at the decline in funding that's happening from the BIS budget to the English further education sector, then the decline is far, far greater than the decline that's happened in Scotland or is projected in Scotland. Each year, the Education Secretary, in conjunction with the Finance Secretary, has managed to put in extra funding to the college budget. That is the process of protection. And if Ruth Davidson would care to take a glance at what's happening to our colleagues south of the border and the colleges there, then she'll see why we are protecting the colleges of Scotland. Ruth Davidson supports the position where our education budget is directly related to the education budget that's being pursued by her colleagues in England and Wales. I support the position where Scotland will have its resources in order to dictate our own priorities so that we can invest in the students of this country. As long as we are under that constraint from Westminster, yes, we'll do our best to defend the colleges and other public services in Scotland. But it ill behoves the Conservative Party, where budgets are collapsing south of the border, to come to this chamber and suggest that anything other than that protection is being pursued for the benefit of the people of Scotland.
Ruth Davidson.
And yet still no acknowledgement that when you're in charge of budgets in this country and your overall budget is reduced and you cut the budget of colleges over a spending review period by significantly more, 24% than your budget is reduced, that any responsibility lies with this First Minister. The last Thursday, at the, by my count, 5th attempt, The First Minister told this chamber that the further education budget in 2011-12 was £555 million, and the budget for 2012-13 is £446 million. £546 million, my apologies. In an earlier statement,
Ms Davidson.
In 2011-12, he stated the budget was £555 million and that the budget for 12-13 is £546 million. Yet, today, the Independent Information Service that he has previously referred to this afternoon for this Parliament, SPICE, insists that the true figure for 11-12 was actually £576 million and the budget for 12-13 is £526 million. Can he just explain this discrepancy, either now or at 5 o'clock?
First Minister.
Given that Ruth Davidson, no doubt inadvertently, made an error of £100 million in the first figure she quoted, no doubt we'll look forward to the correction in the official report. Now, if Ruth Davidson was here to examine the documents presented to the Education Committee, which I've had cause to examine in great detail over the last few days, she'll find the explanation that she's looking for, that the money, the £15 million, was allocated to help with reorganisation in this financial year. It was given to the Funding Council in the last budget revisions, but allocated to be spent in this financial year. She'll find that point detailed in the explanation to the committee, which either means she hasn't read the print of the explanation or she chooses not to tell this chamber. Now, when we come to accuracy in this chamber, Ruth Davidson may remember that in terms of her contribution last week on college funding, she told this chamber she was giving us examples of courses that are no longer available under the Education Secretary's stewardship. She put forward a list of courses. I'm putting into SPICE a list of where these courses are available. The HND technical support, which she said was gone under Mike Russell's stewardship, is available at Kilmarnock College, City of Glasgow College, Cardonal College, Langside College, Addisland College, North Glasgow College, Edinburgh College, Forth Valley College, West Lothian College, Aberdeen College and, famously, Stoke College in Glasgow as well. That goes for the other subjects that she also said were no longer available. So once she reads that from SPICE, will we get another apology that Ruth Davidson has come to this chamber and given us inadvertent misinformation? Or will the Conservative Party hold to the idea that the opposition parties in this chamber never come with inaccuracies? The only difference is they never correct them and they never apologise.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I would be absolutely delighted to put into SPICE exactly which colleges these courses have been cut from under Mike Russell. But what I would ask the First Minister, is, in that half answer he gave me, he tried to account for £15 million of discrepancy that I raised. That's the difference between the chart that was put to the committee and what is available in SPICE. But he didn't mention the Skills Development Scotland money of £5 million, did he?
First Minister.
Which was also mentioned in stage 3 of the budget debate. But of course the £50 million discrepancy adds to a £30 million difference in the figures if it's allocated in the correct year as the documents. And I'm delighted to the fact that Ruth Davidson seems to acknowledge that the £15 million figure exists, and she forgot to tell us about it in her question a few minutes ago. But can I just remind her of what she said in the chamber last week? She didn't say they weren't available in one college. She said, and I quote, "I will give a few examples of courses that are no longer available under the Education Secretary's stewardship." And then she went through the courses and said they were gone. She didn't say they were specifically no longer available in one college. She told the chamber they were no longer available. They were gone. Unfortunately for Ruth Davidson, there are students studying these courses across Scotland at the present moment. They are not gone. They are there. They exist. It is happening. And perhaps Ruth Davidson will come more to this chamber and not give us the old Tory adage, never apologise, never explain. They never apologise and they can't explain.
Question number 3, Willie Rennie. Order. Willie Rennie.
To ask the First Minister what issues will be discussed at the next meeting of the Cabinet.
First Minister.
Issues of importance to the people of Scotland.
Willie Rennie.
Just what does it take for the Education Secretary to lose the confidence of the First Minister?
First Minister.
The Education Secretary is taking forward, under the most difficult financial circumstances, which are visited upon us by a government which his colleagues support in Westminster, a position where no student in Scotland pays tuition fees, not just the students at our universities, but the 23,000 students in our colleges who would be paying tuition fees if Willie Rennie and his colleagues had their way.
Willie Rennie.
As usual, he's an expert on every other government. The last thing he is an expert on his own government. It's astonishing. It is astonishing that after all that's happened in recent weeks, the First Minister believes that Mike Russell should stay. It's wrong that the First Minister puts his interests above those of the colleges. We know the relationship with college leaders has been wrecked. Principals won't speak out in case their colleges suffer. And the Education Secretary has got his figures wrong again, yet again, according to Spice. Mike Russell is so out of control. He's even reporting his own government to the Ombudsman. Doesn't he accept that we need a change of approach? We need figures that we can all agree and an Education Secretary that we can trust to deliver. When will he grasp the thistle?
First Minister.
Well, I've got a list here of major figures in the Scots colleges who have supported Mr Russell in the recent disagreement with regard to Stow College. Mr Russell is pursuing the brief in an excellent manner according to the range of his responsibilities. But Willie Rennie asked me a question. He asked, under what circumstances would I lose confidence in one of my ministers? I think the circumstance in which people would be entitled across the country to lose confidence would be if you took a firm, solemn manifesto commitment, like no tuition fees for the students of a country, and you tore up that commitment for seats at the Cabinet table in Westminster, then these would be the circumstances when not just your colleagues would lose confidence in you, but more important, the people would lose confidence in you. And if Willie Rennie looks around to his diminished and reduced number of colleagues, you'll see that the confidence that the Liberal Democrats have lost is the confidence of the people of this country. And the single biggest issue in which they lost that confidence was their decision to reintroduce tuition fees and the demonstration that they would do anything to support the Conservative Party in return for a share of power. And when that realisation dawns on Willie Rennie and the extent of the loss of confidence they have with the people of Scotland, then perhaps he'd be entitled to say and ask whether Scotland will ever lose confidence in a government which maintains the principle of free education in this country.
Question number 4, Dennis Robertson.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the First Minister what benefits will Scotland receive following the announcement that French firm Arriva is to locate its UK turbine manufacturing site in Scotland.
First Minister.
Well, earlier this week I met with Arriva, who announced it will locate its turbine manufacturing site in Scotland. That will be one of its 3 major European sites. It's fantastic news for Scotland, with the potential to create 750 jobs from manufacturing and the supporting supply chain. It's further good news from the renewable sector, which has seen a £2.8 billion of investment in Scotland since 2009, which delivers economic benefits to communities the length and breadth of our country.
Dennis Robertson.
I thank the First Minister for that answer. I find it extremely encouraging, First Minister, that companies from overseas continue to look at Scotland as being a place to invest. Does the First Minister agree with me that it's perhaps hampered slightly by the UK Government's approach to their energy policies, given it seems to be confused and divided? And would he agree with me that the only way to rectify this is to take the powers back to this Parliament in terms of energy and policy and everything else? Thank you.
First Minister.
Yes, I think there's a great deal of strength in that particular argument. Arriva, as the opposition benches should remember, was one of the companies who recently signed a letter expressing concern about aspects of UK Government energy policy. But I was delighted, absolutely delighted on Monday, that among the many welcomes for the Arriva announcement of its intentions, it was one from John Hayes, the Junior Energy Minister in the Westminster Parliament, who recently, of course, was involved in a speech that was never given, which was going to cite his opposition to wind technology, which then was never delivered. I do welcome John Hayes' salute for the Arriva intentions, but can I gently point out to the Conservative Party that it's not possible to manufacture wind turbines if you don't believe in wind energy playing a role in energy policy.
Question number 5, Richard Simpson.
To ask the First Minister what action the Scottish Government will take in response to concerns that the out-of-hours paediatric services at NHS Lothian, Fife and Borders are at risk due to a shortage of trainee doctors.
First Minister.
Well, we're very much aware of the situation in the south east of Scotland. We've made it clear to the three NHS boards involved that we'll support every effort to ensure that the best quality paediatric services are maintained for children across the region. Following a meeting with the NHS Lothian Chief Executive Tim Davison earlier this week, the Cabinet Secretary for Health allocated up to £100,000 in this financial year and committed a further £500,000 over the next 2 financial years to support the appointments of 4 fixed-term clinical fellows, which will be followed up with a further national and international recruitment campaign for permanent trained staff to maintain services at St John's Hospital in Livingston. I hope the member will recognise the importance of that announcement.
Could I thank the First Minister for his reply and the announcement, but I just wonder what the families and children in Fife, Lothian and Borders are feeling and believe, because the First Minister said in June that the closure of the paediatric ward at St John's was unsatisfactory and that remedial action was well underway to prevent a recurrence. But we now find that the situation is not improved, it is very much worse, with 13 staff down in the medical field. St John's Paediatric Ward, we know now, is under threat of closure from the announcements of Lothian Health Board, and services across Fife and Borders and Lothian are stretched to breaking point, and the remedial action has not yet taken place. So is this yet another broken promise? Is this another case of the public being misled, where the First Minister says what he likes in the Chamber, regardless of what actually is happening in the real world of the NHS?
First Minister.
A recruitment issue, a serious recruitment issue, has occurred because staff are on maternity leave and for other matters. That affects 12.3 whole-time staff out of 47, and because that's 25% of the trainee numbers, then that creates a significant difficulty. The Minister, the Secretary, has met the Health Board. They've suggested the action which I've outlined, which is designed to address these circumstances. We'll also be working with NHS Education Scotland to develop a Scottish-based programmes of study to support the development of advanced nurse practitioners to help sustain the provision of specialist paediatric services across the whole country. Both a response to the immediate situation that's arisen and a longer-term response to enable the position to be better across Scotland. Now, I would have thought that is significant action in the face of a real problem, and I would have thought it would be welcomed across this chamber.
Question number 6, Murdo Fraser.
To ask the First Minister what the Scottish Government is doing to ensure that the 2014 Year of Homecoming is a success.
First Minister.
Well, I think the Year of Homecoming in 2009 attracted, I think, 95,000 visitors to travel to Scotland and exceeded its target by generating an estimated £53 million in additional tourism revenue for Scotland in what was a very difficult year for global tourism. The themes for 2014 will hope to build on that success, and the organisation is ongoing.
MURDO Fraser.
Can I thank the First Minister for his response? He will be aware that the Gathering 2014, to be the centrepiece of the Year of Homecoming, has been cancelled by Stirling Council for perfectly understandable reasons. He also may be aware of concerns that North American visitors are less likely to come to Scotland in June to attend an event at Bannockburn than they would be to attend a clan gathering event in July or August. How is the Scottish Government and its agencies going to ensure that we have enough attractive events in 2014 to make up for the cancellation of the gathering, so that the large number of American visitors our tourist industry is hoping for will still come here?
First Minister.
Well, can I direct MURDO Fraser to the President of the Council of Scottish Clan Association, Susan McIntosh, who said, "We welcome the opportunity to work with Homecoming 2014 team to ensure that plans for the Battle of Bannockburn event are developed with a clan audience in mind." I should say, of course, that in terms of seeing the significance of that 700th anniversary, an understanding of how it must play a part in the year of homecoming, we took advice from a whole variety of quarters, including a press statement from the 26th of May 2010, which said, "The Scottish Conservatives believe that the 700th anniversary of the Battle at Bannockburn must be the centrepiece of these national celebrations. The fate of the nation was decided at the Battle at Bannockburn in 1314 during the Wars of Independence, and it must be the focal point for homecoming in 2014. The author of that statement was MURDO Fraser. I am following MURDO Fraser's advice to the letter, and I do hope it wasn't that statement which resulted in the disgraceful decision not to elect him as leader of the Conservative Party.
That ends First Minister's questions. We now move to members' business. Members who leave the chamber should do so quickly and quietly.